Conservative forces are on course to gain major ground at the upcoming EU elections, according to an exclusive Euronews super poll.
Russia continues to make gains in northeastern Ukraine with further strikes in Kharkiv and the Donetsk region, which left a 10-year-old boy buried under the rubble.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced troops reinforcements to restore order after more than a week of violence in New Caledonia.
Conservative forces are on course to win the EU election, according to the Euronews super poll. The European People's Party is set to confirm its relative majority, yet far-right and ultra-conservative forces could make big gains in France, Italy, the Netherlands and Romania, the Euronews poll center suggests. Liberal Democrats may face a painful defeat, while the outcome for the center-left seems more uncertain and varies depending on the country. The party of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, for example, the SPD, ranks third in his Germany, one seat behind far-right AfD. Despite a likely success in the election, conservative forces seem divided. Many EPP members are either federalists or strongly pro-European. But this is not the case for the European Conservatives and Reformists group, nor for Identity and Democracy. A center-right plus far-right coalition would risk breaking up upon basic European principles or strategies, such as green economy, rule of law or common European defense.
The next European Commission will be more inclined to the right than the current one, Nicola Procaccini, co-president of the Conservatives and Reformist group in the European Parliament, said during an interview with Euronews. He criticized many of the initiatives taken by the Commission in the last 5 years under the leadership of popular socialists and liberals, starting from the choices of Franz Timmermans, the vice president with responsibility for climate.
Franz Timmermans ha avuto un potere persino maggiore di quella di Ursula von der Leyen, potendo anche realizzare il principale programma di governo della Commissione, il Green Deal. Fortunatamente questo è qualcosa che non sarà più possibile, perché indipendentemente da come vanno le elezioni europee, noi sappiamo già che la prossima Commissione europea sarà di centrodestra, perché i commissari vengono indicati dai governi, non vengono indicati dalle elezioni, però, i governi sono di centrodestra.
Però come conservatori sareste disposti a sostenere von der Leyen o un altro candidato del PPE?
Questa è una cosa assolutamente dobbiamo vedere in base ai rapporti di forza, perché potrebbero essere loro a dover sostenere un nostro candidato.
According to Procaccini, stopping irregular immigration must be the first objective in the next legislature of his political group. He rejects the label of Eurosceptics, despite the anti-European narrative of the nationalist parties that compose it, such as Vox, Brothers of Italy and Law and Justice.
È corretto definirvi euroscettici?
No, è molto sbagliato. Noi siamo coloro che vogliono tornare all'idea originale di Unione Europea, ovvero una alleanza di nazioni che fa poche cose insieme ma importanti, che fa quelle cose che gli stati nazionali da soli non sarebbero in grado di fare nel migliore dei modi.
Procaccini reiterates his opposition to any step forward in European integration. The full interview will be broadcasted on Euronews on Friday, May 24th.
Mijn naam is Han de Goede, docent economie in Amsterdam. Als ik lid van het Europees Parlement zou zijn, zou ik 2 dingen doen. A, belastingen voor de inkomens midden en laag bijna afschaffen. 2, de huren in plaats van elk jaar te verhogen, zou ik ze verlagen.
Mein Name ist Andreas Schieder und ich bin Spitzenkandidat der Sozialdemokratischen Partei Österreichs für die Europawahlen. Und mein ganz großes Anliegen ist, mehr Steuergerechtigkeit in einem fairen Europa zu schaffen. Das heißt, Steuerschlupflöcher, Steueroasen endlich zu schließen. Es kann nicht sein, dass die großen digitalen Konzerne weniger Steuern zahlen als jeder gewerbetreibende Einzelunternehmer in unserem Land, auf unserem Kontinent. Steuergerechtigkeit ist ein Muss.
Two dead and 2 wounded after Russian shelling hit the village of Rig in the Donetsk region. A private residence was hit, with 3 people buried under the rubble, a 10-year-old boy among them. His parents were killed in the attack. 12 people were injured as a result of an airstrike on Kharkiv on Wednesday when Russians launched 2 glider munitions at the city. 11 people were injured in the north of the city, with the strike also damaging residential buildings, destroying a cafe and a car wash. In an evening address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said June's peace summit held in Switzerland is a chance to return full protection to every nation under the UN Charter. Russia also launched a missile attack on Chuhuiv, a town 40 kilometers from Kharkiv. The morning strike destroyed a nursery, damaged 15 high-rise buildings and injured 8 people. Leaders around the Baltic Sea have reacted warily to reports Russia could revise the borders of its territorial waters in the region. The plan would revise coordinates used to measure the territorial waters off of Russia's mainland coast and that of its islands in the Baltic Sea. Leaders had varying reactions.
Russia is testing us, how we react on that. And as we see, every one of you want to know what we will do. We will not jump into the fire. So every time you see something, especially from the Russian media, my advice is very simple. Please be careful, because normally it is either fake news or deliberate psyops.
But Russian state media Interfax quoted a diplomatic source as saying the country had no plans to revise its territorial maritime borders. Changing maritime borders requires unanimous consent among states, and negotiations can take several years. The leader of Bosnia's Serb territory has repeated his threat to withdraw from the Balkan country. The threat comes one day ahead of a UN vote on whether to establish an annual day to commemorate the 1995 genocide of more than 8,000 Bosnian Muslims by Bosnian Serbs. Bosnian Serb President Milorad Dodik and populist president of neighbouring Serbia Aleksandar Vučić say the resolution would brand all Serbs as genocidal. Hundreds gathered in front of the Montenegro government building to protest the resolution, which is sponsored by Germany and Rwanda. If voted in, the commemoration day would take place on the 11th of July every year. Mothers of men and boys killed during the 1995 genocide laid wreaths and prayed near the graves of their loved ones on Wednesday. In 1995, over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were massacred in Srebrenica by Serb forces and paramilitary units. The Council of Europe's Venice Commission says Georgia should repeal a foreign influence law that sparked a wave of protests and allegations claiming the government was trying to stifle dissent. Georgian Parliament approved the bill in its third and final reading last week. The divisive bill has sparked weeks of mass demonstrations, with critics seeing it as a threat to democratic freedoms and the country's aspirations to join the EU. The bill would require media, NGOs and other non-profits to register as pursuing the interests of a foreign power if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. Georgia's government says the bill will stem harmful foreign influence over the country, but others worry the law is too similar to a Russian strategy used to crack down on dissent.
On a visit to Nouméa, French President Emmanuel Macron announced troops reinforcements to restore order after more than a week of violence in New Caledonia. Paris has deployed around 3,000 gendarmes, police and other security forces to the archipelago since the violence began on May 13.
ces forces resteront aussi longtemps que nécessaire, même durant les Jeux olympiques et paralympiques.
The visit began with a minute of silence in memory of the 6 victims who died during the riots, including 2 gendarmes and 4 civilians. Macron also said the state of emergency imposed in New Caledonia should not be extended if the roadblocks are lifted. The riots were triggered by a bill to reform the electorate, which would give the right to vote to thousands of non-Aboriginal residents. Opponents feared that the Kanaks will be further marginalized.
Menorca's most famous and most photographed island will now restrict the hours in which tourists can visit. Residents of Binibeca, vell, most of them in their second homes on the island, want to put a stop to overcrowding of the so-called Menorcan Mykonos.
La mayoría de turismo es totalmente cívico. Para algún turismo, pues evidentemente se está subiendo a nuestras terrazas, están entrando en las casas para hacerse la mejor fotografía.
In 2023, 800,000 tourists passed through the small fishing village. It's a private enclave, barely inhabited in winter, and with a summer population of around 500.
Otro día a las 7:30 o así nos estaban echando porque supuestamente se cierra lo que sea al público, a los turistas y demás.
Tourists will be limited to hours between 11 a.m. to 8 p.m, but some fear the decision may bring about financial losses for the island.